Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on this event, which has been a hugely exciting evening that we have lined up for a disability discussion. And we have a very impressive panel to talk to. A quick introduction. My name is Paramjit Kaur Matharu. I am the CEO of Sikh Assembly. And in my day job, I'm a managing director at JP Morgan Chase Bank. And I have the privilege there to be able to participate in a lot of diversity, equality, inclusion, BAME conversations, and this is a natural carryover for me. So Sikh Assembly is a group that came together late last year. It's a diverse slate of professionals from multiple disciplines, and we've come together with an agenda to support and represent Sikh interests and to create broader, deeper influence, both for our own Sikh community, but across community more generally, in particularly the area of welfare across society more broadly. This is our first event in that sort of community welfare pillar, and we are extremely honored to have a very, very strong, successful panel to talk about a topic that I think we don't often discuss as openly and honestly as we plan to do today. So I'm very, very proud to be able to start this conversation. Before we go live with full introductions, just a few housekeeping rules. We will actually be putting live subtitles on for this session, and which will make it accessible for everyone. And there is a chat box link so that you connect to those live subtitles. This is a safe space for everyone to speak honestly about disability and for us all to be respectful towards each other, but a safe space. And I think as far as the subject matter is concerned, I think it's really interesting to note that we think about disability in perhaps different ways with different experiences, but statistically we know that almost 20% of the population will have some impairment, and actually once you reach past the age of 65, 80% of us will suffer some kind of disability. So it's about all of us getting more informed and to become better allies in this conversation, to empower the conversation and to build a society that makes it more equal and diverse for all of us. So in today's conversation, we really do have a lot of information, so I'm not going to take a huge amount of time. But we do have colleagues from Sikh Assembly who are going to join me today. We have Jagdev Singh, who is a major expert in cybersecurity and part of the executive committee of Sikh Assembly, and he will be co-chairing this event with me. We are also really privileged to have Jagdev Singh Virdee, who is also an executive member of Sikh Assembly, but very eminently, he is probably one of the best known statisticians in the UK and the editor of the British Sikh Report, which does a fantastic job in gathering surveys, statistics that are meaningful, that are insightful about what's actually going on within our community. And then, of course, Shani, who I will introduce again, but for now I will say she's in this discussion also as an ambassador of Sikh Assembly and as a role model, inspirational role model, who has been on the journey with Sikh Assembly from the start, and we're very privileged to have her with us. In the 2019 British Sikh Report, Jagdev Singh ran a series of questions, and what came through out of that was that so this was a survey that was completed mostly, it's targeted at the Sikh community, and the statistics that came through are interesting in the sense that if you think about, Jagdev Singh is going to cover a lot more of this in more detail, but we're really talking about the kinds of impairment and the level of diversity of issues that people have to deal with. And so I think we will go through the statistics on that as well. There's also a statistic that came through in terms of how we deal with this in terms of care. So 50% of people with disability are cared for by family. And of those carers, only about 19% of them actually get support, any kind of social support, as carers. So who cares for the carers is another part of this conversation. So as we get into the main body of this conversation, if I can just go across and make introductions to our panelists today. So we're extremely privileged to welcome Mandip Singh MP. So Mandip is a British wheelchair rugby player and Great Britain wheelchair rugby triple Paralympian. I'm going to pause there. That's a fantastic achievement. So Mandip Singh has won 3 gold, 1 silver, 1 bronze at the International Wheelchair Rugby Foundation European Championships, making his mark on team sport at the highest level. Welcome, Mandip Singh. We have Dr. Jatinder Singh. Jatinder Singh is a principal social scientist working for the Environmental Agency and has experience of working in climate change, sustainability, and waste management. And he's married to Sarbjit Kaur. And Sarbjit Kaur herself is a community support worker for Sikh Elders Service, providing one-to-one support around mental health and well-being. Sarbjit is also an independent consultant in core communications, advising and supporting families and schools in relation to education and health plans and special educational needs resources. A dynamic couple. Welcome to you both. Shani, as I said, is the founder of the Asian Disability Network and Sikh Assembly Ambassador. Shani is a disability specialist and works with organizations helping them to transform the experience for their disabled people and customers. Shani is named as one of the most influential disabled people in the UK. And most recently, BBC 100 Women 2020, which recognizes the most influential women in the world, counted her pretty high in that listing. And very hot off the press today, we have just heard that she has also won the nomination as in the first place in the 2020 Ethnicity Awards for outstanding contribution to communities. So what more can I say? Shani, well done. And thank you so much, all of you, for joining us this evening for the conversation we're about to have. And thank you to all of you for making the time for this evening. So I'd like to start with just a little general opener. We're starting with Mandip Singh. So, you know, we have 14.1 million disabled people in the UK. That equates to 22% of the population. So 1 in 6 of the South Asian community live with an impairment or a condition. So this disability faces a sense of stigma in many South Asian communities due to cultural norms and perhaps outdated attitudes, maybe a lack of understanding. And of course, as I said before, disability is wide-ranging. So it's not just physical, it can be non-visible, and impairments can be both, as I said, non-visible and take the form of long-term illnesses. So turning to yourself, Mandip Singh, I know that you acquired your impairment at the age of 19. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Saskia, everybody, good evening. First of all, it's a pleasure to be talking to you on this, to be honoured to be on this panel to share my experiences. So I wasn't born with my disability. I lived a pretty ordinary life. I was studying mechanical engineering, going to college. I lived with my parents and my little sister. And it was the summer of 2000 when I was involved in a car accident. And unfortunately, I managed to break my neck in quite a severe way. And from that point on, I became disabled. And I guess it was a real life-changing moment for me, going through such a trauma. But the thing I got to share is when something like this happens to you, it's not just to yourself, it's to your loved ones as well, your family who have to go through it with you. So it was such a difficult time for us at that point.
Mandip, I deliberately come to you first because before I hand over to Jagdev Singh to talk about statistics, I wanted to capture that image that you have just painted for us really quickly. I'm going to come back and pick up on the story that you're going to share with us. But with that ringing in your ears, I'm going to pass you to Jagdev Singh. So Jagdev Singh, you've taken this as a topic in your latest report. Perhaps you could take us through some of your findings as we come back to Mandip Singh's story.
Thank you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I just, as Sarbjit just said, I'll just take you through some of the basic statistics from the British Sikh reports for 2019 and 2020. Now, the BSR this year is the 8th report, which was published last month, and we collected the data from December 2019 to March 2020, so it's mostly before the pandemic lockdown. And we try to ensure the accuracy of the responses by monitoring as the responses come in by age, gender, marital status, and region. And there are often shortfalls in some areas, so we try to address those through targeted data collection, through paper forms if they don't come in through the online collection. And the resulting sample, after we cleaned the data, this year was about 2,700 responses, and last year was about 2,500. We covered lots of issues in the report, but last year and this year we included disability, and so that's what I'm going to talk about in the next few slides. But this year we also collected information on organ donation, voting in the general election, crime, marriages, faith schools, lots of other issues. So please have a look at the full report afterwards. So turning to disability, we asked people whether they themselves consider themselves to be disabled. And as shown on this chart on the right-hand side by age, it increases with age. But comparing with the statistics that Sarbjit just shared with you about the overall population, we're showing much lower levels within the Sikh population, and that's partly, I think, because underreporting. Because we're asking people whether they themselves consider themselves to be disabled, and the reported percentages in all age groups are much lower than the whole population, and this is possibly due to underreporting because of the stigmas around considering yourself to be disabled. And this is something that we're going to need to look at a bit further. But the overall trend by age does reflect the same sort of trend line as in the general population. Looking at the types of disabilities, so about half of those who said that they had some form of impairment were physical disabilities, about 18% mental health, and then various other categories like learning disability, autism, visual impairment, hearing impairment, communications, and also complex health needs, which could include more than one type of disability. One of the issues that we wanted to explore was whether there was more than one person that was disabled in the same household. And so for the vast majority of people who reported disability, it was one person in the household. But there are quite a few households, nearly 20% in some age groups, where you have two people, and just a few where you actually have three people with some form of disabilities in the same household. So we asked whether you receive any assistance from social services or carers. About half of the respondents said that they were looked after by family, so no external assistance. About a quarter preferred not to say or answer this question, but the other quarter have some form of assistance, whether it's financial assistance from the state or whether they have carers through community or voluntary organisations, through social services or privately organised carers. So only 25% actually said that they get some external assistance. We asked about whether there are arrangements for respite care, and only 19% have some respite care, but 2/3 said that it wasn't even possible to take a break from caring commitments. So we asked people what change would they like to see happen to improve the support that's available to improve inclusion for disabled persons. And there's some quite telling sort of quotes here. But overall, in the summary wise, people wanted better local support and resources from within the Sikh community, improved levels of awareness and understanding of the ranges of disability. There's a lot of stigma and discrimination within the community, and the need for inclusive and accessible gurdwaras. just some wording from individuals. They wanted more support from the Sikh community and not turn their nose up at you when you go to the Gurdwara. Some respite care for my family who look after me. Have services make themselves known so people who need them know that they exist. This one is very sort of heart-wrenching. I think the Sikh community do not write me off completely just because I have physical issues, and an understanding of my disability is needed. Asked about what were the key barriers and challenges that they've experienced. Again, accessibility issues at Gurdwaras came up first, including parking, lifts and ramps, but also discrimination at work and from other Sikhs, difficulties with applying for benefits or accessing local services, lack of understanding or recognition, communication difficulties and lack of resources. And again, some quotes. Stigma against mental health within the Sikh and Asian community. I do not like many Sikhs because of the way they have judged and treated me. Our community talking about how my disability is affecting me and what I might have done in my past life or present life to get that way. People thinking I'm using a blue badge that belongs to someone else because visually I look fit and well. So we then also asked particularly about Gurdwaras because that is a common theme. So Gurdwaras, are they equipped to support disabled persons? And over 60% of all respondents think that Gurdwaras are well equipped to meet needs of disabled, but this is all respondents, not just disabled persons. And it varies, possibly depending on your own experiences in your local Gurdwara or your perceptions. And older people seem to have better opinion than younger ones, possibly again because of their actual experience versus perception. But we also asked what more can Gurdwaras do, and quite a few quotes there, but I'll just highlight some. That people would like to be allowed to do seva in the kitchen without restrictions, safely of course. More understanding and education for the Sangat to understand that not all disabilities are physical, and the Sangat to be educated, to be mindful to both those with disabilities and their carers, how to help rather than assume or target, and be less judgmental, including and welcoming people with disabilities. Many don't allow those in wheelchairs in and demand that they sit in a separate room. This is discrimination. And then just to have the facility available for disabled people. The Gurdwara by me locks the keyway for the chairlift, so my elderly mother doesn't go as often as she would like to, really. So again, summary of what more can Gurdwaras do. People want more practical and emotional support, such as drop-in centres or support groups, signposting by way of information and advice regarding available support, including translation services, fun activities so that people actually enjoy themselves as well, transport to and from Gurdwaras, home visits to the elderly, trained sevadars to help the disabled so that they know how to deal with different situations, improving accessibility, Gurdwaras giving an example, leading by example on issues regarding disabilities, helping and assisting disabled children and families, creating quiet spaces for people of all ages, and making seva, religious volunteering at the Gurdwara, more accessible. So that's where I wanted to finish with just a brief summary, quick run through, but we can be here for more questions afterwards. But the full reports you can see at BritishSikhReport.org. All the reports are there to be freely downloaded and viewed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jagdev Singh. So much food for thought. As I said, the survey and the editorial comment that is provided by Jagdev Singh is extremely insightful and forces us to look in the mirror, I think, and think about what we can do more. Before I come back to Mandip Singh, I know we have been joined in our audience by Tamanjit Singh Dhesi. And I know you're only with us for a short period of time. Maybe if I can ask you, Tam, just listening to Jagdev Singh and knowing who our panelists are, you've also been very closely involved, I know, with as part of your lead up to your career, both as mayor and then obviously in your current role. What more do you think we can do institutionally as a community?
Yeah, thank you very much. And first of all, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be in such wonderful company amongst many, many good friends and people whom I interact with on a regular basis. I want to congratulate the Sikh Assembly and also the Asian Disability Network for having collaborated to put on this event. And it's wonderful also to have excellent role models within the Sikh and within the Punjabi community, the likes of Mandip and Shani, and also I know that Dr. Mimi and Sarbjit Kaurji, they're also on the call as well. And my sincere apologies that I won't be able to be with you to hear all of your eloquence, no doubt, but that's just part of trying to juggle several balls. But I want to pick up on a few things which were explained just now by my very, very good friend and esteemed statistician, Jagdev Singh Virdee. I think I've been on too many calls with you recently at the recent launch of your British Sikh Report, wherein we discussed many of the prevailing attitudes within the community. And while some of the things that really struck me was, firstly, in terms of within the Sikh community, that more than half of those individuals with disabilities are actually cared for by their family. I think that speaks volumes for the family ethos, the strong culture that prevails within the Sikh community, that we need to respect our elders, we need to respect not only the children, but we need to look after one another as well. Because we could at any point in our life, we could also have a disability, as Mandip highlighted in the intro. So that is something for me personally, being a Sikh, it was great to see that statistic. That will be, I am pretty confident that will be a lot higher than for most other communities globally. The other aspect which was a bit concerning is that those carers are not getting enough respite. Carers do an amazing, incredible job. And I know that our social care system has been in a state of crisis for quite some time. But without wanting to get too political and delving into that, what I wanted to say was that those carers, they do need respite, that we need to see that how we can help as a community each other. And when we know that one of our neighbors or one of our good friends is caring for somebody else, especially somebody either who's got a severe illness or a severe disability, then they do need respite, they need our help. So hopefully we can all reach out to them as well. And it goes without saying that we need to make sure that our gurdwaras and our place of community are more accessible. So we should be approaching our local gurdwaras to say, well, look, can we have a lift installed? How can we, if the funding isn't there, how can we fundraise for it? How can we ensure that people with disabilities have also got access to darshan of Guruji as well? So all of these things need to be considered, and that's why it's important that you're holding these disability discussions. The other aspect which was very concerning to me was the level of stigma still attached by some people, which it shouldn't be like that, where we need to be having open discussions, and we need to make sure that if we ourselves have disability, or we know that somebody else has a disability, that we need to be in Guruji's own message of being all inclusive and trying to help everybody within our community. So we need to have these discussions in order to remove the stigma. So I would request all of yourselves, just after today's disability discussions, is possibly to write in within columns within the Punjabi newspapers, for example, or within some of the Asian media, because that's another way that you can get your point across and change people's minds and perceptions. So like something, that's what I do. I try to use my platform, whether that's in Parliament, to speak up on issues that are important to me. So I felt strongly about the farmers who were protesting peacefully within India, and I thought, well, look, I need to be making a stand that everybody has a right to engage in peaceful protest, and I need to be raising such issues. And I think that in our own ways, we need to be doing that in whatever forum we may have. And finally, can I say what an amazing inspiration the likes of Mandip and Shani and Dr. Mimi and others are. Well done, by the way, on especially your accomplishments as a Paralympian, Mandip. And may people like you be a source of inspiration, because you've helped to turn what was an adverse or negative experience in life into something positive and to become a role model. So more power to you, Obo, and thank you once again for your very kind invitation, Paramjit Kaur and Jagdev Singh Gill and the whole team. It was most kind of you to invite me, and I look forward to supporting you in your future endeavours as well.
We're really grateful for you joining us, because I know what your diary is like, Paramjit. So, and actually, I think I speak for everybody on the call. It doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, to see you stand up there with your bright turban, bright voice, and absolutely fearless voice, I would say, is fantastic. So thank you for being that role model too. So
yes, I'll just echo that as well, Tanmanji. Thank you for joining and sharing your thoughts and words. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think picking up from that, and Mandip Singh, I've obviously wanted to interject with all of that information, because what Tan just said about having the platform, using it in the right way and creating a lot of positive impact is something that I think we can all learn from you. So coming back to your story, 19 is a very young age to go through something that must have been extremely traumatic.
Yeah, I think at 19, you're a young adult, and you're trying to find your feet in the world. You know, you got your career and your education, and you're trying to establish who you are. For me, that it come to a sudden stop in an instant. That one moment changed my whole life. So where my friends and my colleagues were off to university studying, I was learning how to dress myself, how to put my socks back on, how to feed myself, and how to try and integrate myself into the normal world again. You know, I speak really closely about my family being there with me, because you know, when something like this happened in the community we are, being Sikhs, you know, we stick really together in a way that I can't really sort of express anymore. You know, they were there for me when I really needed them, and they continue to be. But it was a really devastating time.
Just listening to you is bringing lumps to kind of everybody's throat. But I mean, how long did it take for you to feel that you'd gone through the rehab to start rebuilding again?
It took time. I mean, physically, I was in hospital for over a year. For the first 3 months, I was on bed rest, and I had halo traction, so they bolted a cage to my neck, and I couldn't move. I couldn't speak because I had to have a tracheostomy so I could breathe. And no one really told me what was happening. And my mum would do like she'd pray by my side, and told me that biology is going to make everything better, which parents would do. And it wasn't until a few months later when I was speaking to a physiotherapist, and she said, "You need to start working on your arms." And I was like, "Well, why?" "Well, I'm going to be walking out of here soon." And she just looked at me, and I could just see in her eyes that there's something more than people were telling me. And she proceeded to explain that the chances of me walking again were highly unlikely. We're quite educated in our sort of lives these days. So as I started to process this information that this might be my life for the future, that's when it really started to hit. So having to deal with the physical changes in your body were big, but the psychological changes and having to deal with the impact of what had happened was greater. And that's where we talk about the NHS, and we thanked them over this really difficult period. For me, my thanks start back in 2000, because without them I wouldn't be here today. The doctors and nurses and the physiotherapists and the OTs that helped save me and get me back to where I was. They're amazing.
Just on the point of your mental state, did you have some psychological help as well to get you to think more positively?
Not directly, I guess. From my parents, my dad was really, really stern in the fact that I had to have that willpower to succeed. He said to me, things are going to be difficult, but you got to work hard now. You got to fight through this. They were adamant I was going to walk again. So, you know, they gave me a lot of strength, and a big part of my recovery was sport. And that really sort of helped get myself back into a state of mind where I could sort of reintegrate into the world.
And I think that touches one of the themes that I know Shani and I have talked about before, that when you get hit with this, whether it's at birth or it's through the kind of trauma you had to go through, Mandip, the only way out is by thinking, I can. What can I do? And I can. Because it's the things that empower you then to then set your goals and work towards them, I think, is kind of what I've noted. But to go from what you've just described to wheelchair rugby, I mean, that's quite something. How did that happen?
Yeah, wheelchair rugby, it's got a really close place in my heart. I absolutely love it. Part of being in the hospital, I was in there for about over a year, and the nurses forever playing practical jokes and having a laugh, trying to get the morale in the ward up. You know, it's a great place well, it's not a great place to be, but you know, they try and make it as comfortable and as amusing as it can be. And one day, one of the nurses came up to me. She said, "Do you want to have a go at wheelchair rugby?" And I was like, straight away, this is a wind up. You know, how are you going to play rugby on the grass in a wheelchair? It's just, you know, you're having me up. So straight away, I said no. And you know, she kept persisting. And like a few days later, she said, "Do you want to have a go? Come and have a look." And down at Stoke Manor was a sports hall, no bigger than like half a basketball court. And she opened these doors, and this guy come whooshing past me in his wheelchair. And straight away, I was like, "Oh, you know, all my perceptions of wheelchairs and disabilities just went out the window, because they were, you know, banging and smashing each other and just playing kind of competitive sport." And you know, straight away I thought to myself, I want to have a go at this. And every Thursday I go down. Part of my rehab was to play a bit of wheelchair rugby. You know, of all the things they got us to do, from table tennis to archery to you know, rugby, it was by far my favourite thing. And the guy who used to run the sessions was the captain of the Sydney team going out to the Paralympics, a guy called Bob O'Shea. And he said to me, you know, you've got a bit of potential. I think you might be able to go somewhere in this sport. And he gave me the number for the local team. He said, "If you're ever interested, just give them a call, and you know, they'll look after you." I kind of like thought, yeah, whatever, as you do. And I came back out of hospital and went back to study. I thought, you know, I've got a year left to my studies, I need to complete these. And one day I was opening up a drawer and I came across this number, and all these memories came flooding back of wheelchair rugby. And that's where my journey really began.
So how old were you then?
I'd been 20. Yeah, I'd been 20, yeah. About a year later, so.
A year later, okay. But that is amazing. And as they say, Sangat is all. If you find the right people and you get the inspiration, really, there are no holes to what you can achieve. But that was an amazing sort of backdrop to your story. But I mean, you went on to win gold medals. You didn't just play the sport, you went on to become the top elite in the sport. How did that work out?
Yeah, I think for the success in my sport, it's just been a byproduct. You know, I firmly believe if you love something, you have a passion for it, you know, pursue it in a way that you can't describe. The reason I started to play more wheelchair rugby was it gave me confidence, it gave me strength to be independent. I found that the quality of my life was improving through sport. You know, I was just feeling a lot more myself playing the sport. And I was quite lucky that my parents were quite liberal in the fact that they followed my, you know, whatever you wanted to pursue as your dreams, they supported me in. I remember the first time my mum came to play, I think my sister had to hold back because she nearly ran onto the court when I got knocked out of a wheelchair. You know, because everyone has these perceptions that if you're in a wheelchair, you're fragile and, you know, you can't do this and you can't do that. But that's what I loved about the sport. You know, it broke so many barriers and showed people what we can do. And
that's such an important part of this journey, isn't it? That, you know, the inclusion and diversity that we all look for, because you want to achieve full potential. Every single individual has that birthright. And so, but to get there, you've got to be fearless and be allowed to grow. And I think one of the stigmas that we talk about is that overprotective sheltering and perhaps kind of almost sidelining that can happen, sometimes quite unintentionally and not malicious, but sometimes malicious too. So I think to see the fruits of that nurturing environment that you had is fantastic, and well done to your parents and family and everyone who helped you through that journey. But in the end, I think it's about building that individual spirit. And I know you're not doing elite sport now. You've got an even tougher job as husband and father, I think.
Yeah, so I retired in 2016. I remember we were at the start of the games in Rio, and I had a call from my wife to find out we were expecting our first child. You know, it was such an amazing time. I'm now the father of two toddlers, so things are pretty full on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've you know, when I retired from sport, it was a real difficult period for me, just having that transition from playing elite sport for 12 years. You know, when you're at that level, they tell you what to wear, what to eat, you know, where to be, and everything's quite regimented. Everything's performance based. So to leave that environment and to try and find a career was quite difficult. But one thing I knew was that I wanted to work with people. I've had a lot of help throughout the years. So for me, my career path was going to be around working with people and trying to help people. So I initially started to work obviously in schools, sharing my story and talking about rugby values. I'm now a disability sports development officer for a company called CV Life in Coventry, where I try and get more disabled sports for people in and around the area, try and make things more accessible. Also do some consultancy work with the ability people, where we try and get companies to be more employable by changing small things. You know, everyone looks at disability and accessibility as putting in a ramp. There's so much more to it than that. It's like these small reasonable adjustments you can make to try and tap into these, you know, these amazing people that are out there that can work.
And I think, forgive me if this is too personal, but did you have moments when you thought it was too hard, or there were experiences that left you feeling less than happy about the way things were? I mean, we've talked a little bit already in this session about some of the barriers and biases that the community can have. Did you feel affected in that way?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the first year was probably the most difficult for me, having to come to terms with everything. And for me, it was about acceptance. I'd gone through such a life-changing experience, and you know, there was no way back. I had to accept what was there, and you know, see it as God's plan. And you know, we talk about, you know, praying for miracles. The truth of the matter is, I'm not actually praying for a miracle. I'm just looking for that guidance to be the best that I could be. And you know, there's been negative experiences throughout my 20 years. I've been in a chair longer than I have embodied now. It's sort of gone full circle. But you know, a short one, for example, is I'd be at Gurdwara, and you know, people I don't even know would come up to speak to my parents while I'm with them, and they wouldn't even speak to me. They'd speak across me to my parents, and it's almost like they were mourning for somebody. You know, I know people are inquisitive and they want to know, but at moments like that, I'd go from being a Paralympian to, you know, feeling quite inadequate in that small moment. But even then, you know, I love how kids are so inquisitive. When I go to all their line of questioning, there's no filter, which I love, because I like to explain what's happened to me. I don't really shy on the fact that I have a disability and I'm in a wheelchair. But I think it's human nature to be curious. I just think we should do it.
I think what you're bringing out so eloquently is, you know, we as Sikhs, we talk about hukam and living in Pana. We talk about living within the will of God and living a life of acceptance and then excelling within that. And I think the journey has to be accompanied by education all the way through, because unless people ask, they won't know, but many people feel they can't ask, or they choose not to. And I think the more we can talk about this, and the more, and I'm just looking at the chat on our call, it's extremely active, and people are clearly, you know, people have experiences, but as we've said, disability can be visible and not visible. And so sometimes the barriers that are put up by others are things that then make it harder for the individual who's got to kind of make sure that they can continue their journey without that hampering. But that is a fantastic story, and so impressed by you. And I think, to be honest, you know, in the corporate circles that I work in, it's a very popular phraseology that is used. Change management is the biggest skill set. That as you go through life, you know, you can be ace at one topic or the other, but to be an absolute success in life, you have to be able to handle the good with the bad, you know, fight with the shadows of the night and come out still laughing and joking. And I know you do that. And so really want to celebrate that. So thank you so much. Mandip Singh, we will continue this conversation, and please feel free to interact with the rest of this discussion as well. But as we've said, your journey's got interrupted and then you reinvented it completely. And I'm going to go across now to Jatinder Singh and Sarbjit Kaur. And just in terms of your journey, married for 25 years, your parents are free, certificate. You've got 3 amazing children, one of them who happens to have Down syndrome and autism. And you're both extremely successful in your careers, but you're obviously successful parents as well. And you have your young child. And, you know, that journey is a very different journey to the one that we've just heard from Mandip Singh. What would you say your biggest challenges have been?
Yeah. So I think, looking at the British Sikh Report, I mean, it sort of mentioned some of the disabilities are socially constructed, you know, a concept to some extent, because of, you know, lack of awareness, lack of education, training. And I think, you know, we've really seen that within the community, because you have really polarized views. Sikhs aren't quite, you know, timid to share their views, and especially with Gyan, especially when we go to the Gurdwara, you know, they'll say, is he okay? What's wrong with him? And then we're offering us a fix. You know, saying, you know, you should take him here, you should take him to this Baba, or, you know, spiritual person, or you should try giving him this to eat. And, you know, we found that really strange. And then the other side, we found a lot of compassion. And we're not asking for sympathy. We're not saying, oh, poor Gyan, you know, this is terrible. But it's the perceptions of the community that are sometimes the biggest challenge. But we've tried to change that. So when it was his first birthday, we held a program at the Gurdwara. Then we invited doctors, people with specialities in Down syndrome, and we did an awareness raising, session, and we did Kirtan. And we said, isn't Sikhi about compassion? Isn't it about inclusion? Isn't it about Sarbat Tapala? Isn't it about those things? So why see him as different? So, you know, which we were trying to make that point. And so, you know, so I think that's really important, and that's something that, you know, this is a constant thing we're going to probably have to do all our lives. But, you know, the only way to dispel ignorance is through education and awareness, and actually do what we're doing today, having that conversation, I think.
How was that received when you did that event to raise the awareness? What was the feedback that you got?
I think the feedback was amazing, wasn't it? I think people were really positive, because they were really apprehensive about, you know, talking about this. So, for example, when Gyan was born, it was like kind of source. It was like you were saying, Mandip, it's like somebody's died or something, and they were saying, "Oh, we're really sorry." We were ecstatic that we've got, you know, we've had our 3rd child, but people were coming to us and talking to us saying, "Oh, really sorry to hear the news."
Yeah. So what we did on day 5, when we got the diagnosis at hospital, we sent everybody one random message via text. And yes, we got a few congratulations, but I think the ones that we always remember are the "so sorry to hear that," or "did you not know," or "did you have the test?" So I think we always remember those more, because we weren't least expecting those responses from our family and friends. So by the question asking, when they were asking, "did you not know?" it just implied that they thought, well, what would we have done if we did know?
The implication very strongly was that if you had known, you know, you could have had an abortion, and you could have had a better quality of life for yourselves and for Gyan. And that was never a consideration. This is God's will. We were given Gyan. You know, Sikhs are supposed to rise up to a challenge. You know, we don't think of Gyan as a challenge. You know, you shower him with love and compassion like any child, and that's just one facet of his life, you know, that we have to deal with. And so, you know, we never considered. But it's funny, within the community and our friends, you know, we found massive allies and support, but we also found other attitudes that we didn't really like, even within our close family, and those were really hard to actually accept. And
have they changed though over time as they, you know, I mean, Gyan now is 9 years old, is that right?
Yeah, Gyan's 9 years old. So through his development, there was times when we used to go to the Gurdwara. So firstly, we went to the Gurdwara and the Gyani said, you haven't taught your son how to keep his tongue in. Now, he was only 1 year old at that time. But I could have turned around and I could have said, you know, what are you talking about? But I thought, no, this is the point where you educate the person in front of you, you raise the awareness. So I explained the reason why the tongue's always loose because of the muscles and the control, and over time it'll strengthen and it'll get better and he'll learn to keep the tongue in. So I knew that, but he didn't know that. But the first thing he says, he's like trying to blame us as parents that we hadn't taught our child how to keep the tongue in. Now Gyan has also over then a couple of years, I think when he started to walk at 2.5, which was a fantastic milestone for us, he started to do matha tek constantly. So he did matha tek for about half an hour to 45 minutes. The whole Sangat got used to Gyan. The congregation got used to seeing Gyan go to the Guru Granth Sahib Ji and bow and pay respects. But because it was going on and on and on and on, some people said, oh, you know, you're blessed. But then other Gurdwaras, I was very surprised by someone came over to me and says, shall we get you some toys for your child? And I said, why does he need toys? Then he might sit down. And then I said, what are you focusing on here? My child? Or are you listening to the scriptures? Or you can sit there and close your eyes. He's not distracting me. So I don't see why he's distracting you.
Yeah.
So that was my answer. So, and then once I went to a family function and one of my relatives said to me, he stopped doing shararta, which means being naughty. And I said, what do you mean by stop doing shararta, being naughty? He said, oh, he sits down now. And I said, oh, so doing matha tekna, going to the Guru Granth Sahib Ji and bow down, paying respects, is now something naughty if you do it continuously. So it was just about, again, just rising up and then just, saying it's, just putting your point across in a nice way, but making them understand at the same time.
Do you feel
Well, I've got to say, Gyan is totally blessed to have you both as his parents. But of course, I do think that when the gift of a child who's so beautiful and innocent, actually, there's so much innocence, and when you're taking them through that journey, there's a lot of learning to be done by everybody who comes in contact with you. So I think your approach is exemplary, and it makes a lot of sense that people perhaps don't know, but as you said, they can be very opinionated and hurtful.
Well, can I just come back to Jaz's question? Has things changed? Sarbjit and Jatinder ji, we have a daughter, a lovely daughter called Gurleen. She's 28 years old. She was born with a genetic disorder, and she is our gift. She's our angel, and we are so proud of her. She's actually changed our lives. Yeah. You're absolutely right that these children are God's gift. They're not a curse, which is a common theme that running across the whole Asian community. She's actually changed the course of our lives. I'm a teacher by profession, then I became a teacher trainer, and I was able to retire early, and now we support parents with special needs children in Northern India and in London. So your words have really echoed, and 28 years on, she's actually born on Valentine's Day, so she's going to be 29 in a few months' time. And she is full of love.
And you've just reminded me, we are all Sikhs, and there's a lot of non-Sikhs on this call as well. And I think one of the sermons that I heard when I was a lot younger from somebody I respected hugely was that not only are they a gift, but they also give the gift of seva and service. So the parents have this huge responsibility, but also unique opportunity to allow their butterfly to grow and fly, as all our children are gifts. But that's a really inspiring story. And
it has actually inspired us to the extent that we're building an inclusive school, because I've taught in inclusive schools in London, the first inclusive school in Punjab. So that's under construction at the moment. So these children are here to change your lives for the better, not for the worst. And one of the things that a young parent of a 7-year-old Down syndrome rang me up for support and saying, I'm going to the Gurdwara, and these bibiyan are saying, oh, ye tode purane karma da phal hoega. You know, this is your past lives. This is a curse or a punishment for your past lives. And what do I say to that? And I say to them, you know, it is God's wish. It is God's karam. It is our karam, but it's our good karam. It's not a bad karam. It's actually a good karam that we have this child.
Yeah.
And it's a child that's inspiring us and the rest of the community.
So I was just going to add to that, look, we're blessed to have a child in the first place, and it's a blessing to receive a child.
Yes, because things haven't changed over the last 29 years. The Asian community in the older generation haven't changed, but I'm sure in the younger generation, like yourself,
of course.
And people who are under maybe 40 years old, they are very, very more westernized, and their ideas have changed.
Yeah.
But I think the importance of this conversation, sorry, just starting.
I was going to say that primarily is our objective, to start to have this discussion. Now, one thing I wanted to share with everyone was that my middle daughter was born with autism. She was diagnosed at nursery, and she now is 14 years old. And we've had to learn a lot about what the spectrum is. Yeah. What does it mean to bring a child up who's autistic, and to kind of nurture them, to support them, and all of those types of things. So I think this is why I'm very much passionate about talking about these things. And one of the drivers behind getting involved with Shani, getting involved with the Sikh Assembly, to start to talk about these topics and to start to destigmatize these topics as well. I just wanted to come back to Sarbjit and Jatinder around the autistic side of things as well. With Gyan and Downs, I know that he's also autistic. How is that? How have you managed to kind of negotiate that, and have you had the right support structures, and the support within the school system, all of that kind of stuff?
I think there is a lot of support out there. I think it's navigating that support, because we've got lever arch file of appointments and letters and things from doctors. When you're seeing a speech therapist, or you're seeing somebody about his ears, or and it can become quite complicated. You have to become a semi-expert yourself in actually dealing with that. And unfortunately, you have to slightly push to get the support that you need sometimes, even with education, healthcare plans and all of these things. So if you just sat back passively, you wouldn't get the support. And that's not a criticism of the NHS in any way. It's just that, the pressure that they're under, and he's got different needs. But I think in terms of autism, what would you say?
I'd say, well, Gyan has a lot of sensory issues as well. I mean, just to give an example, we did notice the change at 2.5, where Gyan was using Makaton signing, singing, being verbal, and we suddenly saw that how quiet he became. He dropped the signs, he wasn't singing as much, and we could just see. And I just thought, is it because I've transitioned him into nursery? Is it separation anxiety? I couldn't put my finger on it, but I didn't want to actually go down that route either for a diagnosis at that time. I thought, let's just see how things are. And then maybe, but then I knew, and the speech and language therapist just waited for me to just flag it up, and she goes, yes, I've seen it, and let's just go through the process and let's get a diagnosis then. But the support was wonderful at school and with specialists. But coming back to sensory and stuff with Gyan, with routines have been fantastic. But I think from a young age, we've always sang to him. Every single routine, going to this, doing this, all the part, everything, all through singing. And he's learned so much through his routine, through singing. Now, I know how important Gers is so important. Now, of Gers being uncut hair for Sikhs. So, for example, Gyan used to let me comb his hair, but he pushed me away every time the comb would touch his head. Now, I know a lot of challenges for moms, and I know a lot of moms that I work with who have kept their children scarce. And they've gone through this challenge, but slowly, through pyar, through love, through singing, they've managed to keep their gaze. They didn't give up, even though that they knew that their child was challenging, finding this all very challenging, sensitivities. But we kept going slowly, pyar de now, because we wanted our little boys, our little Vaigurus, to have gaze. And I'm really proud of those moms that have done that.
I think the key thing is distraction. For special needs people, children. Distraction is really the key, and through music and through love, I think are the two key buzzwords that I think every parent should take away. It's through love and music.
Yeah, and then also my close friend, I really wanted to mention today, she said that I could, sadly lost her son at the age of 17, but he had cerebral palsy. But she said, the way my son has come, he's going to go back to God that way. And she kept his gaze for 17 years. You know, little Arjun, yeah.
I think
And,
you know, through listening to you, I think the absolute light that you're shining on this in terms of the love and the care and the nurturing, because in the end, it's those values that allow Gyan to flourish. But it's obviously, you know, again, you're doing it with the Sikh ethos of both love and care, and you can see that this is probably the most successful formula. I just want to say a huge heartfelt thank you to both Sarbjit and Jatinder Singh, and I'm absolutely bowed by your magnificent achievement with Gyan and for yourselves. But I think for all of us listening to this, there is also the realization that there is a responsibility for the parents when they're providing that the care to, as you said, learn it all yourself and then learn to leverage what you can. And for those that perhaps are less able to do that for whatever reason, language barriers or whatever, then the signposting and the community support and help becomes even more critical, because actually help is there, but they may not know how to access it.
I mean,
and so that's something that we're also really quite concerned about.
Just a point that Paramjit's kind of just made then, it sprung something in my mind. And just to ask both of you, have you kind of helped others on their journeys that, you know, because you've gone through 9 years and no doubt learned a whole raft of different things on that journey, have you been able to assist and help others with their journeys? Is there any?
Yes, we have. We've supported quite a lot of families. We've had phone calls where they've said, we're going to take our baby to the Gurdwara for the first time. What was your experience like? We're going to have to meet families for the first time. Also, pre-birth, so people that know that they have a genetic condition. Again, we let them into the life of Gyan, and we let them say, here's my Instagram page, you can see a bit of his journey, but you can also ask us any questions. Yes, I've got some wonderful mothers and we all support each other. And again, with educational healthcare plans, we do have some, you know, there might be moms that may not be able to articulate their needs to staff and schools. So I coach them in a way where I teach them what type of language they need to use, how to be assertive, make sure it's not too emotional, the content that you are writing, make sure it's exactly clear about what you want for your child, what support you need. So yeah, that's what we've been doing. And then also, you know, when there's been an experience where they're feeling very down. So for example, there was like a high profile UK speaker, and they shared a story on their YouTube channel about having an abortion because their child had a genetic condition. Now, this caused a lot of emotional pain, distress to a lot of parents, even myself, actually. I think we were talking about it for days and days and days at home. And we just wanted to say it might have been the right decision for them. And it didn't suit their lifestyle, but you know, there were moms out there that had to hear that story and they were very pained by that, and we were there supporting each other through that as well.
And I think that's where, you know, as part of our Sikh Assembly conversation, which you're part of today, we really think these stories and the lessons learned need to be captured and propagated, because for every 10 people you reach, there may be another 100 out there that don't get the help, and we need to find a way to platform these conversations better to be able to create those networks of support in a broader way. But it's an absolutely inspiring story. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to turn over actually to Shani now. So as I said, so many different ways that we end up with conversations that are so inspirational. And with Shani, I know that your journey. You've been born with a rare genetic condition. Would you mind sharing your experiences on what navigating that within the Sikh community has been like?
Sure. Firstly, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and hello to everybody. It's amazing to see so many people on the call today having this amazing and much needed conversation. So I was born with a rare genetic condition called brittle bone disease. It's got a really fancy medical term, but I'm not going to use that today. And what that meant was my bones are liable to break without any trauma. So it means that my bones are very weak. And because of that, I also have a short stature of 3'10". So again, if I put that into context, I'm about the height of a 4-year-old, a tall 4-year-old. And by the age of 14, I had broken my legs 6 times. And my childhood was just focused on not trying to break. And I wouldn't have to fall over, I wouldn't have to have an accident or injure myself in order for my bones to break. And I know 6 breaks might sound like a lot, but people with my condition actually break 300 to 400 times in their lifetime. So the fact I've only had 6, I consider myself to be extremely lucky. But I think the journey really started when I was born. So for the first 2 years, I was undiagnosed. Doctors didn't really know what my condition was. And when I was born, the doctors knew that something wasn't quite right with me and just sort of gave me to my parents and says, we don't know what's wrong. We're going to help you figure it out, but take her home. And I can't imagine what my parents must have been going through, you know, having this news, because nothing had come up, you know, during the pregnancy or in the scans or anything. But then on top of that, my mum especially had to deal with comments like, not only have you had another daughter, but even she's disabled. So just, you know, my parents must have been going through their own situation, their own, you know, feelings of processing it and probably grieving to a certain point as well, because I know that's a very natural state and process to go through. Then on top of that, they would have these awful comments being said to them. And, you know, my mum's also shared to me that people blamed her, that people said, oh, you worked too much during your pregnancy, therefore she's born with this condition. And it's not anybody's fault. It's something that could happen to anybody. Yes, it's a genetic condition, but it doesn't run in my family. So yeah, I really feel for my parents, especially my mom, because it's always the women that get the blame, isn't it? But growing up, I think, especially within the Sikh community, there's so many positives as well as negatives that I can draw upon, and just to mention a couple quickly. Some of the positive things have been, I have always been surrounded with a huge and loving and supportive community most of the time, because, you know, in South Asian communities, we are big communities, we're big families. That's always something that I've really enjoyed and really loved, because I went to a special needs school. It's hard to make friendships when you're in a class with very severely disabled children, some that can't even talk. So, you know, when I wouldn't have friends over to play, I would have my cousins or, you know, my siblings to play with. So there's lots of benefits. And I think definitely being his daughter that I am makes me a very sociable person. My house has been like King's Cross Station, so it's made us as a family very sociable.
So I take it your dad's rubbed off on you then, has he?
Most definitely, and I know he's watching today. My dad and my mom, because if it wasn't for my mom, who didn't treat me any differently from my siblings, and she, you know, she really instilled in me that life's hard, full stop. Life is going to be even harder when you are different, when you look different, and the world is going to treat you differently. Therefore, you have to be a really strong person if you want to make it in this world. And she really instilled that in me. But I think Sikhi has really shaped who I am, because it's guided me throughout my life and the decisions that I've made. But it's based, you know, the religion is based upon equality, and that's what I'm working for every single day, is everyday equality, everyday inclusion. And I know, you know, just read the comments, you'll see how much work we've still got to do. But that really does keep me grounded. It helps me with what I'm doing and my work. It gives me faith. But then I guess just to bring this to a close, I guess some of the other negative experiences are many of what the other panelists have touched upon. Mandip, when he said, you know, I'd be there and people would talk to my parents. I had the exact same, and I would reply, and then my mum would tell me that I was being rude. So I've always had to educate my parents on this journey as well. And I think the biggest things I would say is people didn't have the same expectations for me as they had maybe their own children or other children my age. So, you know, I remember when I was learning how to drive, when I went to college or university, I would remember telling the bibiyan, the elder women at the Gurdwara, the Sikh temple, that this is what I was doing. And they were going to fall off their chair with amazement. And I know it's a generational thing as well. I understand that.
But people make assumptions, right? They make assumptions
Yeah,
about you and they believe them.
Yeah, I think we have low expectations of people that live with conditions and impairments. And but I think really what I want to say is if I'd have let those low expectations, not only the ones I faced within the Sikh community or the South Asian community, but in society generally, because let's not forget, we all, well, disabled people live in a world that isn't designed for them. If I let that all get to me, I wouldn't leave my front door. You know, it's really hard. So I just want to, I guess, bring the point back to the disabling factor isn't someone's condition or their impairment. It's actually the barriers and the bias and the prejudice and the discrimination that they face that amongst us as a society we have.
Sorry, that was just such a tremendous statement, Shani, and it's resoundingly true.
I was going to ask you, obviously within the kind of our community, there's the things you've shared there, but what about within the professional life? How has it been different? Has it been different there, or has it been challenging there as well?
It was challenging when I was starting out. So when I was 16, I had to apply for over 100 jobs before I got my first interview. And that was a real harsh life lesson for me to learn at the age of 16, that life's going to be hard. People are going to judge you on your ability based on what you look like. And, you know, so I had a lot to learn at a really young age. And I think when you have a conditional impairment from a young age, you have to grow up quite quickly sometimes. I remember I was 16 and my consultant was asking me if I wanted to have kids. I was probably still playing with Barbie dolls. No one was talking to me about having kids. So it's really strange, because on one hand, the medical world and the professional world, I'm going to say the white world, is treating you in one way, and then at home and in the community, even as an early 20-year-old or a late teenager, I was still very much being treated as a child, because I don't think people knew how to treat me. You know, I wanted my freedom. I wanted to go off and go to work just like anybody else. But some of the comments that I got were like, well, you don't need to work. You can claim disability benefit. But I was like, I want to be a contribution to society.
Set the bar low.
Yeah. And so, you know, I've heard all of that. I've had all of that. So I think professionally, yes, it's been tough. Yes, it's been challenging. I think now I think I've had, you know, a real big growth in people recognizing my work and what I do, and that's been an amazing thing to happen. But it's been really hard, and the reason that I'm doing this work is because of my own experiences, and I want to change that for others. I don't want other people to have to go through the same thing, you know, because if we look at mainstream society, it already feels very awkward about disability. It's already very fearful about disability. And then when we look at ethnic minority communities, it's even further behind, because we don't have language, we don't have forums like this to talk about things, and topics that are considered taboo, like disability or difference, they just aren't accepted enough, unfortunately.
And I think that's such a big part of why these conversations are really important. So I think I personally want to really congratulate you, Shani, because I think you've punched through many ceilings now. To be a woman, to be such a feisty achiever, and really the companies that you've started to influence in the fact that you've got these accolades at such a high level within corporate world, but within the community as well. I mean, that is a fantastic, huge achievement, and it shows a lot of inner energy. And we can see the spirit comes obviously from both the parents, but also the way that you have grown your own kind of individual personality and stature. And I think one of the things that we at Sikh Assembly and the Asian Disability Network, I know there are many other grassroots organizations out there that are picking up on the challenges that perhaps are societal challenges, but they get imposed on with the label of disability. And I think more broadly around diversity inclusion, I mean, my own story, I've been through a bit of a health roller coaster, 31 major surgeries, had a very major intervention before I had my kids. And I do remember a very, very harrowing incident when I came home after a major surgery and somebody said, why is she still lying down? Women come home with cesareans and pick up their babies and get on with it. And it was like, oh, really? Are you going to really say that to me? And it was painful. But you learn from those. And I think we learn better when we share these stories with some it takes something to share a story in a public forum, but I think what it does, as I said, is it brings the message to a much broader platform. And I think today's conversation, and I've not seen such an interactive chat on one of these sessions before. So I want to really say a very special thank you to every single one of you who have participated. And I think the story that Shani has shared, and Sarbjit and Jatinder Singh, and obviously Mandip Singh, very, very different start points. But what really unites every one of us on this call today is what we can do and how we can achieve it. And for those that are not getting the access or perhaps don't have the support structures, what can we do more? So one of the purposes of this conversation today is to actually just become better allies. Sikh Assembly's aim, and I know Asian Disability Network, our partners, British Sikh Report, and all of the very, very insightful work that's being done, we are trying to get to that deeper cause. What's the cause and effect of various things, and how do we then influence both community attitudes, but also government policy? And if there are needs, and I can see there's been quite a lot of really constructive, thoughtful comment from our participants today on things that could be improved and how we could, and that is exactly the purpose of these conversations, that we can be more collaborative and that we can come together and create the right platforms for change, and to allow more people to kind of get better out of the potential that everybody has to achieve in life. I mean, talking to Shani and talking to Jagdev Singh, I start to pick up statistics. So none of this is my research, it's exactly there. But Jagdev Singh said something to me, which I noted, and I think the observation is that over 80% of people will acquire some disability during the course of their working life. And so, if disability in its wide-ranging form doesn't affect you now, it might do in the future. So I think education, again, learning how to deal with today for yourself, but maybe the tomorrow is something that we all need to worry about. And then supporting people. I want to leave the group with a thought around the demography of population generally, but certainly in our community as well. The elderly, the incidence of dementia, the coziness of being able to be looked after in your homes, that can get yanked away in the later years. And then that care model changes. How do people manage the change, and what really goes on? And I come back to what we said at the start of this session in terms of the carers. And, today's carers need care themselves so that they can actually thrive and have a quality of life. And so I wanted to leave everybody with that thought around quality of life and chardi ka, as we call it in Sikhi, that we are blessed with a journey in our human form, and we owe it to ourselves to actually live it fully and with wakefulness and conscionable actions. And so helping yourself, helping other people is the most fantastic journey. And I want to thank you all for participating in the call today, and particularly want to thank Mandip Singh, Sarbjit Kaur, Jatinder Singh, Shani, and of course my colleagues Jagdev Singh and Jaspal Singh for this fantastic conversation, Arvind Paul and others who've spoken, and a fantastic thank you to all of you, and God bless you all. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.